Why do the fish you buy keep dying while your tank tests perfectly fine? Because the thing killing them usually is not your tank at all. It happened in the 20 minutes between the store counter and your living room, and nothing on your test kit will ever show it. For years, I could not keep a store-bought fish alive past the first month. My established fish were fine. Every new one I brought home died, and I kept blaming my water, my filter, my luck. Then a man at a club meeting straightened me out. He was 68. He had spent his working life keeping the systems running at a public aquarium, and he had kept animals alive that cost more than my car. He listened to me complain for about 2 minutes, and then asked me one question that ended the whole problem. 30 years keeping fish, about 15 of them behind the counter of my own shop, and I have used what he told me on every single fish that has entered my house since. Stay with me to the end, because there is a 60-second check he did before he ever bought an animal, and it tells you whether a store fish is worth taking home before you spend a dime. The question he asked me was this: what are you doing to the fish between the store and the tank? Not what is in your tank, not what your ammonia reads. What are you doing to the animal during the move? And I did not have an answer, because like most people, I was floating the bag for 15 minutes and dumping it in. That is where the whole thing turned around for me. A fish that dies 4 days after you buy it usually did not die of anything in your water. It died of the trip, either from the shock of being moved too fast between two different waters, or from something it was already carrying when you paid for it. 2 causes, and both of them happen before the fish ever meets your filter. If you have kept a tank for any length of time, you already half knew this without being able to name it, because you notice that the fish you have had for 2 years never get sick and the trouble always arrives in a bag. That is not a coincidence, and it is not your water playing favorites. Your tank did not fail, the handoff did. I should have caught it sooner than I did. 30 years ago, I bought a 10-gallon starter kit, filled it, dropped 6 neon tetras in that same afternoon, and watched 5 of them die inside a week, and the shop sold me about $40 of bottles to fix it. Blue clarifier, pH adjuster, ammonia remover, something called fish tonic. None of it was the problem, and none of it helped. Back then, the problem really was my tank. It was never cycled, meaning I had no bacteria colony living in the filter yet to process the waste. But I learned that lesson so hard that for years afterward, I assumed every dead fish was a water problem, and I kept testing and testing while the actual cause was happening in a plastic bag in my car. Start with the shock half, because it is the piece nobody explains at the counter. A fish sitting in that store tank is chemically matched to that store's water, its pH, its hardness, its temperature, its dissolved minerals. Hardness is just how much dissolved mineral is in the water, and keepers measure it as GH and KH, general hardness and carbonate hardness. Your house water can be completely different. Store water at a pH of 6.8, and your tap at 8 is not a small difference, because the pH scale multiplies, so that gap is a lot bigger than the numbers make it sound. Drop a fish across that gap in one motion, and its body has to rebalance the water moving through its gills all at once. That is osmotic shock, meaning the fish is fighting to hold its internal salt balance while everything outside it changes. Some fish shrug it off. Plenty do not, and the ones that do not often look fine for 2 or 3 days and then quietly fade, which is exactly why nobody connects the death back to the bag. Temperature works the same way, and it is the one people do get partly right. A bag that rode home in a cold car can drop several degrees, and a fish moving from 72 degrees into 78, which is roughly the difference between a cool bath and a warm one on the back of your hand, is being asked to speed its whole metabolism up in minutes. None of this is exotic biology. It is the same osmotic regulation described in any aquatic biology text, and it has not changed since I learned it 30 years ago. What has changed is that nobody at a register has any reason to spend 15 minutes explaining it to you when there are 6 people in line. You have lived this. You pick out a healthy-looking fish. The store guy nets it. You drive home with the bag and the cup holder. You float it and let it swim out, and it looks great all evening. 2 days later, it is hiding behind the filter. 4 days later, it is gone, and your other fish are perfectly fine, which makes 0 sense to you. That pattern, new fish dying while established fish thrive, is the single most common thing people carried into my shop for 15 years. And when it was not the shock, it was the other half of the problem. Store systems move enormous numbers of animals from wholesalers every week, and a lot of stores run rows of tanks on one shared central filter, which means one sick fish shares water with 100 others. Nobody is being sloppy on purpose. That is just the economics of the business. You are buying an animal that came off a truck 3 days ago. The wholesale rep I dealt with for 15 years was blunt about it. He told me which farms shipped clean and which ones shipped trouble, and he knew before the box was open which bags would have losses in them. That knowledge never makes it to the sales floor. It just gets absorbed as the cost of doing business. A guy came into my shop every couple of weeks, for the better part of a year buying replacement mollies. Same story every time. And nobody had ever told him that the fish were arriving stressed and going straight into his tank the same afternoon. When I finally explained it, he looked at me like I had been hiding it from him. Fair enough. Everything in this video, and the full 101 secret system behind it, is in the Aquarist's Bible. 204 pages covering the tap water that's quietly poisoning your fish, and the $5 fix for it. The nitrogen cycle explained the way nobody at the store ever bothers to. The $3 filter upgrade that doubles what your filter can handle. The overfeeding that causes the deaths nobody admits to. Easy plants that actually live. And the cleanup crew that eats each type of algae so you stop buying the wrong one. Plus a quick reference card you can tape inside your stand, so you always know the right move when a fish looks off. If you are tired of testing your water, doing everything right, and still losing fish for no reason you can explain, this is the reference you have been waiting for. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. The trick he showed me is the same thing every public aquarium on Earth does and almost no homekeeper does. Nothing goes into the display, ever. Every new animal spends 2 to 4 weeks in a separate holding tank first, and only then does it join the main system. He said the fish that killed the most animals in his career were the ones that looked healthy on arrival. A quarantine tank, sometimes called a hospital tank, sounds like a big commitment until you see what it actually is. A 10-gallon tank, which is about the footprint of a large cardboard shoebox, $20 used. A cheap sponge filter, that is just a sponge on a tube with an air pump bubbling through it, $10, and you keep it running in your main tank year-round, so it is already full of the bacteria that process waste, ready to go the day you need it. A basic heater and a lid. Bare bottom, no gravel, so you can see every scrap of waste and siphon it in 10 seconds. One piece of PVC pipe or a plastic plant so the fish has somewhere to hide and settle down. That is the whole rig, under $50, and it will outlive every fish you put through it. That sponge filter detail matters more than the rest of the list, so do not skip past it. If you drop a brand new sterile sponge into a quarantine tank the day you bring a fish home, that tank has no bacteria in it, and the ammonia from the fish will climb with nothing to eat it, and you have built yourself a poison box instead of a hospital. Park the sponge in your main tank permanently. Let it sit there for months growing a colony, and it becomes an instant working filter the moment you move it. That is the whole reason I like sponge filters for this job, and I will take a simple sponge over a fancy canister for a small tank any day, whatever the unboxing channels say. Getting the fish into that quarantine tank is where the shock half gets solved, and floating the bag does not do it. Floating only matches temperature. It does nothing about pH, hardness, or minerals, which are the parts that actually hurt. What you want is drip acclimation, and it costs nothing. Put the fish and its store water in a clean bucket or a plastic tub. Run a length of airline tubing from your quarantine tank down into the bucket, start a siphon, and tie a loose knot in the tubing until you slow the flow to 2 or 3 drips a second, roughly the pace of a bathroom faucet that needs a new washer. Let it run until the water in the bucket has about tripled in volume, which usually takes 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Now the fish has crossed the chemistry gap slowly, instead of falling off a cliff. Net the fish into the tank and throw the bucket water out. Do not pour store water into your tank, ever. That water has been sitting with a stressed animal and whatever came with it. Keep the bucket somewhere warm while this runs. Actually, better than that. Drop a small heater in the bucket if the room is cool, because an hour of slow drip in a chilly bucket undoes half of what you are trying to accomplish. And keep the bag out of the light on the drive home. A dark bag is a calmer fish, which is why the store staples it shut in a paper sack in the first place. Those small things are not superstition. They are the difference between an animal that arrives merely annoyed and one that arrives already spending its reserves. Those next few weeks are the part people rush, and I understand why. You want the fish in the display where you can see it. Give it the full 2 weeks minimum, 4 if you can stand it. Keep the light dim, feed lightly, do a small water change every few days, and just watch. What you are watching for is breathing rate, appetite, and skin. Most of what a fish is carrying will show itself in that window: white spots, cloudy patches, frayed fins, weight loss. A fish that hangs at the surface or scrapes itself on things. And here is the real payoff of doing it this way. If something does show up, you treat it in a 10-gallon bare tank with a few dollars of medication, instead of dosing your whole display and wiping out the bacteria colony in your main filter. I have watched people nuke a beautiful established tank with medication for one sick newcomer, and then spend a month rebuilding the cycle while everything else got sick from the ammonia. I did it myself once, years back, and I will not do it again. Keep a notebook while the fish is in there, even just a scrap of paper taped to the lid. Date it came in, what it ate, anything you noticed. I track parameters and failures by tank that way, and the patterns show up fast. One particular species that never makes it. One source that always brings something with it. The reset rule the old man used was simple, and I have kept it. If you see any symptom at all, the clock goes back to 0, and the 2 weeks start over from that day. It feels excessive right up until the first time it saves your display tank. Run the money on this, because it is not close. Say you lose 2 fish a month to this pattern. Call it $8 a fish for anything decent, plus the bottles the store hands you every visit to fix it. $25 a trip. Over a year, that is easily $250, $300 in dead animals and useless product, and you are exactly where you started. And that math does not count the fish you stopped buying because you decided you were bad at this, or the tank somebody tore down and put in the garage after the 3rd round of losses. I watched a lot of people leave the hobby over exactly this problem, convinced they had a black thumb, when what they actually had was a missing step. The quarantine rig is a one-time $50, and it never needs replacing. Think about that for a second. $300 a year, over and over, versus one afternoon at a garage sale. And I know the objection, because I have heard it 1,000 times. My store is clean. I have never had a problem. Maybe you have not yet, but a shared central filter does not care how clean the glass looks, and you are the one who finds out, 4 days later, in your own living room. Look, everything I'm walking through here is in the Aquarist's Bible. 204 pages, all 101 field-tested secrets. Water chemistry made simple. The cycle done right: filtration, substrate, feeding, easy plants, algae control, stocking, and the self-cleaning tank that mostly runs itself, plus what to actually do when it goes wrong, with a quick reference card for the stand. 3 decades of fishroom knowledge in one place. No more mystery deaths, no more scrubbing green glass every week, no more fighting your tank and dumping money at the fish store. Link in the description, QR code on screen. Where this stops being enough is worth saying plainly. Quarantine catches the common stuff, and it saves most fish. It will not save an animal that arrived already crashing, gasping, and pale in the bag. That fish needed to never leave the store, and if you see it, hand the bag back. It also does not cover a real outbreak with heavy symptoms across multiple fish, which is a slow down and research situation, not a dump a bottle situation, because the wrong medication in the wrong water can finish what the disease started. Shrimp keepers need to be even stricter. Their tolerances are tighter than fish, and many common fish medications contain copper, which kills invertebrates outright. And one safety thing, since you are about to run a second tank with a heater and an air pump in it, every cord needs a drip loop, meaning it dips below the outlet so water runs off the low point instead of tracking back into the socket, and that outlet should be a GFCI, the kind with the test and reset buttons. 2 tanks means twice the cord sitting next to water, and if the quarantine tank ever ends up empty for a stretch, leave it running with the sponge in it rather than draining it, because a dry tank means a dead colony and you are back to starting from nothing the next time you need it in a hurry. Your water region changes how careful you have to be on the acclimation half of this. If you are on very soft tap, the kind that comes out nearly empty of minerals like a lot of the Pacific Northwest, and the fish came from a store running hard remineralized water, that is a wide gap, and you want the slow end of the drip, 90 minutes rather than 45. Hard water regions moving fish the other direction, same story. Across the tanks in my fish room, once I started doing both halves of this, the drip and the full quarantine, My losses on new fish went from routine to maybe one animal a year, and most years none. That is one hobbyist's records and not a controlled study. Your water and your source may behave differently. But a guy on the hobby forums out of Phoenix posted his own log a while back after switching to the same routine, and he went from losing roughly half of every batch he bought to keeping essentially all of them. His numbers, not mine. It lines up with what I saw come through my counter for 15 years. Now the thing I promised, the 60-second check the old man did before he bought anything, and I have never seen a store volunteer it. He walked the whole row first. Not the tank he wanted, the whole row. Because if those tanks are plumbed together on one central system, and most store walls are, then every animal on that row shares water. He looked for one dead fish anywhere in the row, one fish hanging in a corner, one fish with white specks. Find any of that and the fish you want is swimming in the same water as the problem, no matter how good it looks. Then he watched the gills on the actual fish, counting the beats, because a fish breathing hard and fast in a calm tank is a fish already under stress. And stress plus a car ride is how they die on day 4. Then he asked one question at the counter. When did this fish come in? Anything that arrived in the last few days is still mid-transition and has not shown what it is carrying yet. His rule was simple. Come back in a week and buy it then. Let the store hold the risk instead of you. Free, 60 seconds, and it eliminates most of the bad purchases before they ever get into your car. He is retired now, still breeding killifish in his basement last I heard, and he never once tried to sell me anything. He just asked what I was doing to the fish between the store and the tank, and the answer was that I was doing everything to it and calling it bad luck. Set up the little tank, take the extra hour on the drip, and give the animal 2 weeks to tell you the truth before it meets the rest of your fish. The people whose tanks are full of old, fat, boring fish that have been alive for years are not luckier than you. They just stopped skipping the handoff, and now you know where it was going wrong too.